Welcome to While We Were Distracted, the podcast where we explore topics that often get overshadowed in the rush of daily life. Please take a moment to like and subscribe, it really helps.
Welcome back, everyone. Ready for another deep dive?
Always ready to jump into the deep end.
Today, we're tackling a story that, honestly, sounds like something out of a Hollywood thriller political scandal. Alleged sex trafficking. Even whispers of international conspiracies. It's the Matt Gaetz extortion plot.
Oh yeah, this one has it all. Court documents, leaked texts, and even a wild interview on primetime TV. It's like trying to solve a puzzle where half the pieces are missing and the ones you do have don't quite fit.
So we've got Matt Gaetz, a Florida congressman, facing serious accusations, but then he claims he's actually the victim of extortion. Where do we even begin to untangle this mess?
Well, before we get to Gates himself, we really need to understand this guy, Joel Greenberg. He's the one who sets this whole crazy chain of events in motion. Starts out as like your typical rich kid, son of a wealthy Florida dentist, but then he somehow ends up the tax collector for Seminole County.
Tax collector. That's an interesting career path for a trust fund kid. What happened?
Well, let's just say Greenberg developed a bit of a reputation. Reckless behavior, shady financial dealings, even rumors of a crypto scam. And all this is going down during an election year, which puts him right in the spotlight.
So the pressure's on. Does he try to, clean up his image when he faces a challenge in the Republican primary from Brian Butte, a former teacher?
Not quite. Instead of laying low, Greenberg goes on the offensive, launches this absolutely bizarre smear campaign against Butte, think fake Facebook profiles, accusations of sexual assault, even handwritten letters sent to Butte school, falsely claiming he's a predator.
Wow. So he basically creates this whole alternate persona to try and take down his opponent.
Yeah.
I mean, what was he thinking?
It seems like a desperate attempt to hold onto power, but it backfires spectacularly. The letters get turned over to the police, and guess what they find? Greenberg's DNA and fingerprints all over them. Not the smartest move.
Yeah, you have to wonder about his judgment at that point. So he gets arrested for stalking, but I have a feeling this is just the beginning of his troubles.
Oh, you are absolutely right. Once the police get a hold of Greenberg's phone, it's like they hit the jackpot. Evidence of embezzlement, drug use, prostitution, and this is where it gets really serious messages between Greenberg and a 17-year-old girl that suggests sex trafficking.
Okay, things just took a very dark turn. We've gone from spoiled rich kid to someone facing some potentially very serious charges. So how does Matt Gaetz enter the picture?
Well, facing a mountain of charges, Greenberg's lawyers make a bold move. They reach out to then Attorney General Bill Barr's office with a proposition. They offer up dirt on a sitting Congressman Matt Gaetz in exchange for leniency.
So Greenberg's playing hardball, hoping to save his own skin by implicating Gaetz in his crimes. What kind of information does he have on Gaetz?
Greenberg claims he has evidence that Gaetz was also involved in sex with minors. This is potentially explosive stuff, especially since the DOJ is already investigating Greenberg for sex trafficking of a minor. Adding Gaetz to the mix would be a huge deal.
And this is where that infamous Tucker Carlson interview comes in, right?
Yeah.
The one where Gaetz makes his own shocking accusations.
Exactly. The New York Times catches wind of the investigation and publishes a story that sends shockwaves through Washington. Gaetz, in response, appears on Tucker Carlson's show and drops a bombshell he claims to be the victim of an elaborate extortion scheme.
He goes on to allege that a former DOJ official, David McGee, approached his father, Don Gaetz, and demanded $25 million to make the sex trafficking allegations disappear.
And he doesn't stop there. He claims his father, working with the FBI, wore a wire and caught McGee red-handed, essentially offering to bury the investigation for a hefty price tag. Suddenly, a sitting congressman is accusing the DOJ of a cover-up and extortion.
Talk about a plot twist. This story's getting more complicated by the minute. Now I've got this mysterious Bob Levinson figure entering the picture. Remind me who he is and how he fits into this already wild situation.
Okay, strap in, because this is where the international intrigue really kicks in. Bob Levinson was a retired FBI agent who disappeared in Iran way back in 2007 while on a CIA mission. The FBI, desperate to bring him home, hatches this plan to fund a rescue mission with the help of, get this, a Russian oligarch.
A Russian oligarch. Seriously. This is starting to sound like a spy thriller.
It really does. The FBI's point man on this operation is Andrew McCabe, who later becomes a key figure in the Trump-Russia investigation. But before all that, he's working with this oligarch who agrees to provide $20 million in exchange for green cards for his family.
So they've got the funding, they're ready to go, and then what happens?
The mission gets shut down. Abruptly. Never fully explained why, but some sources point to interference from Hillary Clinton's State Department. The rescue attempt falls apart, and years go by with no sign of Levinson.
That is until 2020 when Levinson is declared legally dead. But then this Bob Kent character emerges, claiming Levinson is actually still alive. What's the story there?
Bob Kent is an Air Force intelligence officer who says he received proof of life from a network in Iraq. He reaches out to, of all people, David McGee, Levinson's former colleague, with a plan to rescue him.
Wait a minute, David McGee? The same guy who allegedly tried to extort Matt Gaetz' father. That can't be a coincidence.
Exactly. And now the timeline starts to look very suspicious. How did McGee and Kent find out about the investigation into Gaetz so quickly? Was this a genuine attempt to save Levinson, or was it all a fabricated plot to exploit a vulnerable situation?
So we've got Greenberg facing serious prison time, Gaetz claiming extortion, and a missing FBI agent who may or may not be alive, and we're just getting started.
Oh, we've only just scratched the surface. Stay with us as we unpack the fallout from the alleged extortion attempt and explore another twist that brings Israeli intelligence into the mix. Things are about to get even wilder. So last time, we left off with Don Gaetz wearing a wire, meeting with David McGee and Bob Kent, who were suggesting this whole $25 million plan to get Bob Levinson back and make the investigation into Matt Gaetz disappear.
Yeah, it's a lot to wrap your head around, right? Like, it's almost like we're watching some high-stakes poker game where the players keep switching sides and nobody's quite sure what the rules are. So what happens next?
Well, according to Matt Gaetz, his dad got McGee and Kent on tape, explicitly offering this quid pro quo. You'd think with evidence like that, the FBI would have an open and shut case.
It would seem that way. A recording of the alleged extortion attempt, a sitting congressman cooperating with the FBI, hard to imagine a stronger case.
And yet, here's where it takes another crazy turn. Despite the seemingly ironclad evidence, the FBI just drops the case against Gaetz. No charges against McGee or Kent either.
They just dropped it.
Yeah.
After all that, I mean, why? What could possibly explain that?
It's baffling, right? It's one of the biggest unanswered questions in this whole saga. Why would the FBI, after going to all the trouble of setting up a sting operation, just walk away? Were there political pressures we don't know about? Did the evidence somehow fall apart?
I guess it's possible the recording wasn't as clear-cut as Gaetz made it sound. Or maybe there were some legal technicalities that prevented them from moving forward.
It's possible, yeah. But without more transparency from the FBI, we're just left speculating. It's troubling. You know, this lack of accountability when it comes to powerful figures like Gaetz and those operating the world of intelligence.
Right, right. And as if this story wasn't already convoluted enough, we also have this whole Israeli consulate angle. It feels like we're peeling back another layer of this tangled web.
Things get really interesting here. This where Scott Adams, the Dilbert guy, comes into play, and he brings some pretty explosive information to the table.
Wait, the comic strip artist? What does he have to do with any of this?
Well, Adams says he received texts from a staffer at the Israeli consulate, Jake Novak.
So a comic strip artist is texting with an Israeli consulate staffer. Okay, how does this tie back to Gaetz?
The crazy part is that Novak, who is apparently a friend of Adams, texted him about the investigation into Gaetz before it was public knowledge. And in these texts, he claimed that Don Gaetz, Matt's father, was secretly bankrolling efforts to free Bob Levinson.
Hold on. So Israel was involved in trying to rescue this missing FBI agent. Why? What was their interest in this?
That's the million-dollar question. The texts don't really give us a clear answer. Novak even mentions a commando team leader waiting for wire transfers to clear. It definitely suggests some level of involvement from a foreign government in a domestic political scandal. And that should raise some serious red flags.
This is getting more and more like something out of a spy novel. We've got a potentially compromised congressman, a missing FBI agent, a shadowy rescue mission, and now the Israeli consulate is mixed up in it all.
And then there's Joel Greenberg. Don't forget about him. He ended up cooperating with the DOJ, served 11 years. But it's still not clear what information, if any, he actually provided about Gaetz. McGee and Kent have always denied any wrongdoing. And Matt Gaetz, well, he's still in Congress, though this whole ordeal has definitely tarnished his reputation.
So many players, so many loose ends. It feels like we're only seeing the tip of the iceberg here, like there's something much bigger and much darker going on beneath the surface.
It definitely leaves you with more questions than answers. What's really unsettling is how this whole thing raises concerns about these honeypot schemes, potentially operating at the highest levels of government.
Honeypot schemes. I've heard that term before, but can you explain what it means in this context?
Well, a honeypot scheme is basically a trap. It's designed to lure someone into a compromising position that can then be used against them. classic intelligence tactic. And you have to wonder, was Joel Greenberg running one of these schemes?
You're suggesting he was intentionally luring people, maybe even with the knowledge or direction of others, into situations where they could be compromised.
It's a disturbing thought, yeah. But look at his behavior, how erratic it was, the lengths he went to discredit Brian Butte, his political rival. It's not outside the realm of possibility. Was he trying to solidify his own position by taking down anyone he perceived as a threat? And if so, was he working alone?
If that's true, it suggests a level of calculation, of manipulation, that's pretty terrifying. And remember, someone leaked the information about the Gaetz investigation to McGee and Kent. How did they find out so quickly?
That's another piece of the puzzle we're missing. It suggests a network of individuals, maybe within law enforcement or intelligence agencies, willing to exploit sensitive information for personal gain.
So much for transparency and accountability. It makes you wonder who you can really trust and what really goes on behind the scenes in Washington.
It's a sobering reminder that power can be a very dangerous thing, and those who wield it aren't always acting in the best interests of the public. This case is a prime example of how power can be abused and how easily the truth can be manipulated and hidden.
We've covered a lot of ground here, but it feels like we're just scratching the surface. What other insights can we glean from this tangled web of intrigue? It's wild, right?
Yeah.
Every time we think we've got a handle on the story, another layer peels back, and there's even more complexity. Honeypot schemes, leaks from the FBI, a foreign government maybe meddling in U.S. politics. It's hard to even process it all.
It really shows you how secretive the worlds of politics and intelligence can be. And right in the middle of it all, you have these figures like Matt Gaetz, whose motives and actions are still a complete mystery.
I keep thinking about the bigger picture here. What does it say about our system when someone like Gaetz can be accused of such serious things, and yet he just walks away?
Yeah, it raises serious questions about accountability, doesn't it? Especially when it comes to people in positions of power. A case like this, with all its unanswered questions, its loose ends, it can really erode public trust in institutions like the DOJ, the FBI. I mean, if those agencies can be manipulated, influenced by political pressure, then what does that say about our justice system?
And it's not just the institutions, right? This whole thing makes you think about how vulnerable anyone can be. If a sitting congressman can be targeted this way, what about the rest of us?
That's the scary part. This case really highlights how power can be abused and why we need to be constantly vigilant when it comes to our rights, our freedoms. Especially in a world where information is being weaponized, we all need to be aware of the tactics used to control and manipulate people.
So, looking back at this deep dive into political intrigue and potential conspiracies, what are the key takeaways here? What should our listeners keep in mind?
I think the biggest takeaway is that things aren't always what they seem. We need to be skeptical, question the easy narratives, especially those coming from people who have something to gain by shaping public opinion.
It sounds like we're being told to question everything, to dig deeper, look beyond the surface. That's good advice in today's world.
Absolutely. We have to be careful about the information we consume, cross-check sources, consider different perspectives, and then form our own conclusions.
It's also a reminder that we need to hold those in power accountable. Whether they're elected officials, law enforcement agencies, even foreign governments, we can't just take their word for it.
Transparency, accountability. Those are the foundations of a healthy democracy. If those foundations weaken, it impacts our trust in the whole system.
The Matt Gaetz extortion plot, with all its twists and turns, it's ultimately a story about the abuse of power and the lengths people will go to protect themselves.
A cautionary tale for sure. A reminder to be aware, to be vigilant, and to never stop questioning those in positions of power.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I'm left with one final question for our listeners. In a world where information is power, and it's getting harder to distinguish truth from fiction, how do we ensure that justice prevails?
That's the question we all need to be asking ourselves.
That's it.
By staying informed, being engaged, being willing to challenge the status quo, that's how we play a part in safeguarding our freedoms and holding those in power accountable. It's an ongoing effort, requiring constant vigilance and a commitment to truth and justice.
Well said. And on that note, we'll leave you to ponder the many unanswered questions surrounding this fascinating and frankly unsettling case. Until next time, keep diving deeper. If you enjoyed this episode of While We Were Distracted, be sure to watch the video that inspired it. Please take a moment to like and subscribe. It really helps.